Okay, this second part of our bacterial podcast is bacteria podcast is on antibiotics, which is a hugely important topic for a lot of reasons. Obviously, antibiotics are medicines that we use to kill bacteria, so they're very important to us for our health, to prevent us from getting bacterial infections that can even kill us. Um, and they are also important in terms of evolution. We can kind of see bacteria evolving right in front of our eyes as they become increasingly resistant to antibiotics. So this relates to a lot of things that we've been talking about. First, let's understand something about bacteria and their structure. They have a cell wall, which we have already established. And that prevents them from bursting. Remember, a cell membrane here, if this is a bacteria with only a cell membrane, and they don't exist, bacteria all have cell walls. If that bacteria that had no cell wall was in a watery solution and the water concentration was higher out here than it was in the body of the cell, remember osmosis? Osmosis says that water always flows from areas of high concentration to low concentration, just the diffusion of water. So water would flow, in this case, into the bacterium. And since it has no cell wall, the bacterium would just pop. It would just lyse. It would burst. Okay? But because bacteria have cell walls, the cell wall prevents that from happening. Water can still flow in, but the cell wall is strong enough that it doesn't allow the bacteria to burst. And that's good if you're the bacteria. Okay, so water is always entering cells by osmosis, and the cell wall prevents lysis, prevents the cell from bursting. Okay, also remember that the thing that makes up all cell walls in all bacteria is called a peptidoglycan. It's a chemical that's different from any other cell wall chemical in all the other kingdoms. Plants have cellulose cell walls. Fungus have chitin cell walls. Animal cells don't have any cell walls at all. So this is unique, okay? Now, what antibiotics do then to kill bacteria is they disrupt that cell wall structure. They mess it up. They break it down. And as a result, the bacteria start to take on water and eventually they burst. This is pretty clever little mechanism. The reason being that you can take this antibiotic that's going to poison this bacteria, and it will have no effect against you. Why? Because you don't have a cell wall. You can even give an antibiotic to a plant that has a bacterial infection because the cell walls that plants have are entirely different. They're cellulose, so this won't affect a cellulose cell wall. It specifically breaks down peptidoglycan. Now, if you are sick with a virus and you go to the doctor and ask for an antibiotic, if it's a good doctor, and then they won't give it to you because antibiotics won't work on viruses. If you have a viral infection, it won't work on viruses because they're not alive. They have no cell walls. It's complete. It would make no sense to give you an antibiotic for a virus. They have nothing that an antibiotic could work against. So, now, let's specifically now talk about antibiotic resistance. There are lots of bacteria in your environment every day. Most of them are benign, meaning they are harmless. They don't do any harm. But some of them are ones we want to avoid because they do cause disease. They are pathogenic. Okay, they're pathogens. Now, among all of these bacteria, many of them, can be killed by antibiotics. But a few of them have gotten mutations that allow them to survive an antibiotic exposure. Their cell walls don't get disrupted. Okay? So let's say I have my nice tabletop that I am really worried. I don't want to get any bacteria on me, so I take my antibiotic soap and I just smear it all over my table and I clean it off and I get rid of all the all the bacteria. So if this is my table, okay, I've just wiped it down and I've killed every bacteria, benign, whatever that was on that table, except there was this one bacteria right there that was resistant to the antibiotic I used. And so now it's living here. And what I've just done is I've killed all its competition. So it can live on that table and reproduce and reproduce and reproduce and reproduce. And it can use all the resources that might ever get on that table. And now what I've done is I have just made the perfect environment for this resistant bacteria to repopulate my table surface. So the next time I go to clean my table surface with that antibiotic, it's not going to work. I have allowed the fittest organism to survive and reproduce. So once the benign competitors have been eliminated from the environment, then there's no competition for these resistant bacteria that get left behind. So they grow, they flourish, they reproduce a lot. And so the next time you use your antibiotic, it doesn't work. So if we do that and we repeatedly use antibiotics in livestock and feed for animals or unnecessarily in our own bodies and things like that, what we're basically doing is creating an environment that encourages resistant bacteria to grow that we can't kill. And it's a huge problem today. It's been a real push to try to get antibiotic use down so we don't encourage the creation of resistant bacteria. So, as we were saying, there are a lot of human behaviors that have contributed to antibiotic resistance, and mostly that is overuse of antibiotics and other kinds of antibacterial agents in general. By people, we put antibacterial agents in soaps and cleaners and things like that. We unfortunately have had a history of taking antibiotics when it just wasn't necessary. For example, in a case of a viral infection, sometimes we just would go to the doctor and demand an antibiotic, even if the doctor knew it wasn't going to work. Doctors have gotten a lot more strict about just giving prescriptions to people who are upset because they're sick and they demand them. In animals, farm animals, antibiotics are used in just feeding to prevent infection and improve growth in the animals, but you get a little dose of antibiotic every time you eat meat that has been treated with antibiotics, and so we spread it that way. Also, we misuse antibiotics. Sometimes we don't complete a prescription of antibiotics. We take, 4 or 5 days, we start to feel better, and we've killed a lot of bacteria, but maybe we left 1 or 2 that were resistant, and then they come back and our infection comes back, but this time the bacteria is resistant. Which is why we shouldn't share antibiotics for the same reason. We might be encouraging resistant bacteria to form by giving someone the wrong kind of antibiotic. So a lot of things that we've done that we're trying to correct to try to prevent antibiotic resistance. If you want to kill bacteria, the best thing to use is soap and water. If you really need to have a clean surface, bleach. Bleach is great. It's going to kill everything. It's like a nuclear bomb. Boom. Bleach is going to kill everything that's in its path. That's why it's not very good for people to take to kill bacteria, because it's going to kill you too. But if you're trying to clean a surface, soap and water, bleach, those things work really great. Okay, so that's it for antibiotics and resistance. We'll stop here and then we'll finish up with one last podcast on bacteria. Take care. See you later.